grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Please say.
One which is unconscious decides the general contentment level in my life. So that's the general contentment. And each one of us will have it. And over and above that, we would have happy moments and we would have sad moments. So these happy moments and sad moments come because you meet a friend, you interact with a person, you get some success or whatever it is, you are happy. Your general contentment level might be sad also, but still you have these surges of happiness, and even if you are happy, you could have surges of sadness. So happiness is a state. You have to tell this separately. Well, you consume alcohol and you feel happy. It's a state. You take any of the drugs, okay, which are addictive, and one would feel happy. So happiness and sadness, and that's the reason if you are a psychiatrist, you give antidepressants if you are depressed. And if you are manic, you give anti-manics. And the condition improves. That means sadness and happiness is a chemical thing in the brain. And at the same time, whatever you say, you say cognitive behavioral therapy. And we say, okay, you decide the thought process and the emotion will follow. So if you want to change the emotion, you better change the thought process. So what it means is that the happiness spot at the thought level, the feeling level, and at the genetic level, they work in tandem. So they are linked like a gear system. So the general satisfaction level that you may have in your life, okay, could be because of your genetic. How far the genetic has been expressed will be decided by the childhood events that you have had, or the social trauma, stress, psychosocial stress that you have in your life. Now you know that the genes that we carry are influenced by the environment. That's the reason the cancer incidence has increased nowadays, because of the pollution. Deafness has increased because of the sound pollution. Coughing has increased because of the air pollution. Now because of that, the cancer starts, so genes become cancerous. The cancerous genes are switched on because of that. So what means our genes are, are affected by the environment. So how we lead our life will decide how many diseases we will have. So longevity depends on certain aspects. So we say lifestyle diseases, and if you improve the lifestyle, then you live longer. So Stanford Medical College conducted a big survey on what is one single factor that affects the longevity. And they found that longevity does not necessarily correlate with the healthcare facilities that are there in the community. It does not correlate much with exercise that you do or diet you conduct. But longevity correlates very closely with social connectedness. And then we realize that these hedonic hotspots in the brain, the first hotspots is associated with only survival, eating, thirst and libidinal tract. The second hotspot, which is in the nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area, that is associated with bonding. So somewhere in the evolution we realized that we cannot be all by ourselves, okay? The group gives us strength, so we had to live in a tribe. So we started herding. And for that herding, when we came together, there was fear and anger. So the strongest person would become the leader. When the group started increasing in number, then there were rebels. So we realized that whenever there are rebels, the herd cannot control itself. So you require some law to abide so that the group remains intact. And that is when we started having some kind of a dictum or code of conduct. Okay, and that is what the religion started giving us. So then there were some code of conduct that were engaged in the society, and the society grew and was able to still remain together, and that is when the growth happened. So we had one hotspot for growth, the other for hotspot for security, and the third hotspot, the most primitive, for survival. So all these hotspots, survival, security and growth, they are connected together like a gear system. And what we know is that they are not only wired together, but they fire together. And whenever they fire, the met enkephalin level, that is the endogenous opioids in the brain, they start increasing. And in order that they increase, there are multiple chemical reactions that has to happen in the whole of the brain. And these all things happen because the person's will runs riot. And literally, whenever we see an active alcoholic, it brings us to a point where you can't understand why this person could be behaving the way the person is behaving. Otherwise, when he's not had a drink at that time, he's just like you and me. Maybe some eccentricities, all of us have those eccentricities, that's fine. But beyond those eccentricism, there is a huge pendulous change from one end to the other end. And people find it extremely difficult to understand the mind of an alcoholic. And for a long time, people said that he was a sinner, so it was called a sin disease. So that was the religious view of people who misbehave. So it was called a sin disease. Then people said that, okay, psychologists came in and they said that, oh, this is something to do with learning. So learning is positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, reward and punishment. So those are the 4 ways in which people learn. So something that gives me happiness, I will repeat. So an alcoholic gets happiness out of consumption of alcohol, or drug addict gets happiness out of drugs. And because of that, he wants to repeat that experience again and again. And that is how he becomes an alcoholic. Fair enough, people accepted it, they said very good. But it did not answer a main question which said that, okay, if I drink alcohol and I have hematemesis, it's a punishment. I should stop immediately. Why the hell do I start drinking again after 10 days, 15 days? Knowing that if I drink, my hematemesis will recur. My liver will get damaged. I will go through one of the most painful conditions of my life called acute pancreatitis. My diabetes will get will not be controlled. So in spite of I am losing my health, wealth, relationships, I am getting into accidents, but still I am continuing to experiment with alcohol. And the surprising thing is that each and every alcoholic stops, and when he is wanting to start, what does he say? The next time I will drink it in a controlled amount. So when I was thinking about it, when I read the big book, it said that every alcoholic has this dream of controlled drinking, but he carries it to his cemetery. So what it means is, for some reasons, the person's ability to control the drinks has gone away. So then it boils down to willpower. And then I started wondering, hey, has the control really gone away? Because whenever I consume alcohol irresponsibly, but after I have 2 drinks, I don't have to control myself that I don't want to have the 3rd drink. So a skill or the ability that I am not using to say no to the 3rd drink, how can I say that it is lacking in somebody else? So what it means is, there is nothing like a control, there is nothing loss of control, there is something else to it. So people did not know what to do, but certainly people knew that it causes euphoria, happiness, it increases bonding, so it's a social amalgam, it gives you courage, so it's an enactogen, and it makes you feel good, so it is entheogen. So much so that all these entheogens are used in most of the religions. Whether ayahuasca, alcohol or cannabis, most of the religions use it to enhance spirituality. So you have euphorics, you have empathiogens, you have enactogens, and you have entheogens. And from all these four words, three new branches of neuroscience developed. One is a branch called high pleasure states. So things that give us high pleasure. The second was adaptive evolutionary bonding, AEB. And the third was genospirituality. Now these are three different words, I'll explain it to you. What we know is in our brain, there are hedonic hotspots. So hotspots are, whenever I get happy, okay, there are three hotspots in my brain. One is at the unconscious level, the other is at the emotional level, and the third is at the thought level. Where other diseases subserve their function, if that area gets involved, you will have. So in the brain, wherever chemistry changes, if area emotional brain gets involved, then there would be an emotional problem. If thinking brain is involved, there would be a thinking problem. If executive functions are involved, there would be problem with the executive functions. So we call them co-occurring disorders. So you have addiction and you have a co-occurring psychiatric disorder. So the co-occurring disorders do require separate treatment. You cannot treat the same co-occurring disorder with Alcoholics Anonymous. And that is the reason why we felt, I started feeling that it was only a co-occurring disorder that the psychiatrists were treating. But DSM-5 says that alcoholism is a psychiatric illness, and if it is a psychiatric illness, it has to be treated. And psychiatrists is supposed to know what is it that will help. And that is where my reading started increasing, and I started attending meetings. And I read the first book sometime in 1998, Big Book. They have a book called Big Book, and I read it in 1998. And the first reading was something like, I don't know what I'm reading. It was only when I started seeing the patients and reading the book, then it started making some meaning. So I remember in KM Hospital, outside the library, sir, we have a quotation. It says that reading the books and not going to the ward is like going to sail in an uncharted sea without a compass. Without a compass. And that is where I started feeling that I should try to read whatever that is given in the textbooks and whatever that is given in the big book, and then see patients and try to find out what is it that probably I'll make out of it. And that is how my journey started. I was many a times mocked at psychiatric conferences because I was pursuing the 12-step program in the treatment. Finally, whatever I was seeing was absorbed by science. And in 2020, in October 2020, Cochrane Systems of Review was published. And Dr. Haley from Stanford University and people from European Union for Substance Use Prevention, they came up with a meta-analysis. Now, as you know that meta-analysis is the highest in evidence-based interventions. So this was a meta-analysis. Cochrane Review is meta-analysis of meta-analysis all over. And that said that beyond doubt, the 12-step program works better than all the other modalities of treatment that exist. And then I said, oh my God, now I have something to depend on. Because I was seeing the recoveries, but the science kept on having skepticism about the 12-step program. So then I said that, okay, this is the document that I have, and then I started moving around. And then the psychiatrists started, mental health sciences people, physicians, they started acknowledging that there is something. So my understanding is even before Newton, the apples used to fall down. Right? And people used to, if you ask the 6th standard student before Newton, okay, he would also say if you cut the stem, the apple would fall down, it won't go in up. So what it means is that Newton just gave a reason for the fall. Why does it fall? It's God's wish. That was the answer that was given at that time. But what he said, that what is the science behind that God's wish? And that's where Albert Einstein comes in. And he says that if I am in front of God, what would you ask him? So I said, I don't want to meet him. I would like to know what he thinks. And what he thinks, what God thinks is science. And well, each one has his different God. Common people have common God. But whatever that we have, we believe in, is for our good. So then we said that God is good, orderly design. So that is the concept of people who have problems with believing in God, okay, they can accept God as good, orderly design. So that is how I started looking at science and the treatment of alcoholism. Whenever I would talk to an alcoholic, he would say that it's a biopsychosocial disorder. And they would say it has a family component because society is too big, family is poor. So biopsychofamilial disorder, which leads to spiritual bankruptcy. From punching here. So she's down, so I'm going to keep high.
Yes, sir, it's thanks.
Yeah. So, my apologies. The All India radio recording that we were engaged in took some time. And thank you very much for waiting here. I am Dr. Ashish Deshpande. So remove the stand. Can you move from your side? So remove the mic. Yeah. So I'm a psychiatrist and I've been practicing addiction psychiatry for the last 30 years. And when I was at KM Hospital and I was placed in the de-addiction ward, at that time, the first time I had interacted with recovering alcoholics. And before that, I had interacted with people who were suffering alcoholics. And all those alcoholics who had taken treatment from me, I felt very good to interact because they were able to stop.
Ashish, I make what take president.
Doctor?
Dattaram Desai.
Dattaram Desai?
Yeah.
Oh, please.
I am a Goan state president.
Please, sir. Thank you very much. Please come. And the person who introduced me to Indian Psychiatric Society and made me the fellow, honorary fellow, Dr. Pai Kakode, I think you also should be here. Sir. For me, sir. For me. Yeah, so as I was saying that when I first saw alcoholics and they were sober, they knew that I wanted to help them. And funny thing was that in spite of all my efforts, all of them had relapsed in about 3 to 4 months. And I was wondering why they were not able to remain sober. Something that was so easy for a doctor to understand. And I was fed up because I used to spend a lot of hours with them in the ward. And I took a vow after 6 months that I will never return to addictions ward again. And my late nights in the Center of Excellence were taken up by my head of the department as my passion for addiction psychiatry. And when I finished my post-graduation, there was something called 4th year residency. And my head of the department, Dr. L.P. Shah, said, Ashish, you have to go back there as a 4th year resident. I said, no way, I'm not going. So he insisted. And that's how I landed up. And when I landed up, all the people whose names I had scratched off from my diary and put them on probably Yama's diary, they were all there, smiling, happy. And I asked them that, they were telling other people that we are sober because of this doctor. And I knew for sure that I had failed miserably. And then I asked them, forget about what you are telling them, tell me, what has helped you? And everybody said it was Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, for me, Alcoholics Anonymous is just a 5-mark note. And these people are telling them that it has changed their lives. And that's how my journey started. I have from northeast to south to north to west to interiors of India. I just was calculating, and there are about 70 places where even psychiatrists are not available. There I have been for AA programs, and on an average each group of AA has about 20 to 25 recoveries that I have seen. Where psychiatrists are not there, where medicines are not there, there are recoveries. So the malady of the brain, which is considered as one of the most chronic and resistant disorders, seems to have a solution. But there was not sufficient scientific proof. So I remember when I was in KEM hospital and I used to bombard my teachers with understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous, they would say, "अरे उसमें God भी होता है यार, वो surrender, कुछ समझता नहीं है आपने वो." And they would discard it as a treatment. And they would say that, okay, the only thing that we can give is give medicines, and they would try to give medicines. And we would understand that those patients would not come back for follow-up. It's not that all the patients don't require medicines, because finally, whenever the chemical imbalance in the brain goes odd at that time, areas make it happen. So make it change into a high metencaphalin level state. So what we know is that these circuits, okay, are happiness circuits which are closely connected with bonding and growth. So these are the adaptive evolutionary bonding circuits which are engaged with high pleasure state circuits. And then we come to, so what is the role of spirituality here? Why are we really spiritual people? What is the need? So there was one person called Pargamont. In 2005, he wrote a fantastic article on psychology of religiosity. He didn't say psychology of religion. He said psychology of religiosity. And what he said was that he believed that each one of us has a need for sacred. So that need for sacred comes from the glorious uncertainties of life. And what are those glorious uncertainties? Those glorious uncertainties are on some days we would come out of our cave and a deer would be there in front, okay, and it would be waiting for you to kill. Then you would come back home, within 5 minutes the whole family would be happy to have you back at home with plenty of food on the plate. And on some days, in spite of working out 4 days, 5 days to the heat and under the sun, you would not find even a rabbit. So then you started wondering, well, what did you do wrong? The second factor was that when we started evolving and bonding at that time, we knew that we were going to die. So we bonded, we had love, affection, we started developing relationship, only to know that on one day it is all going to end. So these two feelings, emotional investment in relationships and feeling that all the relationships that you have developed, which have given you immense pleasure, it has allowed you to grow, okay, are going to be gone. So that is the reason why you wanted to be invested in this relationship for the maximum duration. You did not want to die, and that is the reason why you wanted some spirituality here. And that created the need for spirituality in our mind. So for the longest times we have been spiritual. Whether you believe in God or not is a different thing, but we are spiritual. Even people who believe in science are spiritual. Yuval Harari in his book says that even communism is a religion. They don't believe in God. But he says that it is a religion because it follows everything that a religion follows. So need to believe in something is extremely important for all of us. Now there is a wonderful writing that one of the psychologists in 1993, he did it, Cloninger is his name, and he studied personalities. And in personalities, what he did was that he tried to associate these personality traits and whether they run in families. And he found that many of the personality traits, okay, like neuroticism or over-involvement or agreeableness or acceptance of spirituality, all these traits seem to be running in families. And not only that, Nielsen in 2007 was able to spot the genes for spirituality. Now we knew that serotonergic chemicals and dopaminergic chemicals in the brain are being used by all religions to enhance spirituality. So whether it is cannabis or ayahuasca or mushrooms, okay, or alcohol or opium, okay, all these are used in some civilizations or the others to enhance the spiritual connect with the higher power. So he was able to find out that 5-hydroxytryptamine locator protein gene and alpha-2 AP beta gene were associated with spiritual existence. And these two genes have a long arm and a short arm. And if you have a long arm of hydroxytryptamine locator protein and the short arm of the other two, then come what may, you will be spiritual. So then we started feeling that, okay, so what it means is that the spiritual belief is stronger when you have a particular gene combination and finds a surrounding which is conducive to belief, it latches onto that belief. And when it latches onto this belief, automatically all the belief related issues start getting inside your persona. And then people say, oh my God, he is a religious person. And when you have this religiosity in your mind, at that time, these three hedonic hotspots, they start working very efficiently. And that is the reason people who are religious by nature, their bodily diseases heal faster. They are more sincere at work. Their family relationships are better. And their marriages are less likely to break. But people who do not have this belief, they are likely to have difficulties in their lives in the parameters that I just now mentioned. So what it means is that this belief has a survival value, and it is important for us to believe in something. Now in AA, there is a lot of mention of God, and many times the doctors find it difficult to accept the concept of God. In olden days, when my uncle used to practice, I still remember his prescription. And it used to mention that I prescribe and he treats. It used to be there, right? Nowadays, I don't see that.
It is still there.
It's there in your, many times it is not there now. So somewhere we have started feeling that, okay, I won't say whether we are God or what, I don't know what to dwell into that. But the concept of God in Alcoholics Anonymous is somewhat different. What it says that power higher than you. So what we're talking about is a power higher than you. Now why do you require a power higher than you? Imagine that I'm an alcoholic and I'm suffering like crazy and I'm being hit from all sides everywhere and I'm trying to stop, I'm trying to do something about my alcoholism, but I have failed. I have failed. Now, if I knew a solution, I would implement it, right? The fact that I'm still looking at a doctor and saying that help me out, what it means is that I'm not able to control my drink. So it is beyond me. Okay? So when these people who say that I can't control, what do I do? And the doctor tells him, okay, go and meet an alcoholic or go and attend a meeting. And he sees that, oh my God, there is a huge group of people who say the same story, tell the same story. And whenever they tell the story, they are happy. I am very sad with my story. I don't know how it's going to end. But when I look at these people, they say the same story, but they have happy faces. So what it means is that I don't know how to get well, but these guys seem to know it. So I can't, but something can. And if that something can, obviously, I have to have the openness to accept that if I allow that thing to reach me, I would be a better person. So I can't, something can, let something. These are the first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That my life has become unmanageable, boss. I can't do, I am powerless. Okay. And then something can, God can, my higher power can. Okay. And the third is that higher power reach you. So you have to be willing to recover. You cannot will yourself to recover. You have to be willing to recover. Sometimes you know, what is the difference? There is a difference. Can any of the junior doctors say, I am going to succeed in my life? Does that happen that way? You have to continuously make an effort, right? You cannot will yourself to succeed. You have to be willing to be successful, right? You have to keep learning all the time the new things that come up, and then you become successful. You cannot just, ambitions can't rise. There are so many people who are ambitious, okay, but everybody doesn't get success. But there are some people, okay, who are the ones who keep working on their ambition, and they are the ones who get. So what it means is, a knowledgeable man is the one who knows what he doesn't know. If I start feeling that I know everything about everything, then that's the first time that I'm going to fail. I stop learning. So there is a famous poet, Pablo Neruda. He got a Nobel Prize for literature, and he said that the moment you stop learning, some part of you dies. And that is precisely what 12-step program is telling you. Somebody knows it, ask. So if you have the desire to stop, they have a solution. Now in that solution, what is the first thing? They have 4, right? In Alcoholics Anonymous, there are 4 tools that they talk about. What are those 4 tools? One is the meeting. So you attend the meeting. Second is the big book. Okay, if you have, this is the big book. This blue book. This is the big book. The third is the 12-step program. And who implements, who helps the person with the 12-step program is a concept of a sponsor. Who is a sponsor? A person who has done the 12-step program. So it's the sponsor. And then what happens is, once the person has done the 12-step, okay, and has been found to have recovery, then he helps others. Okay, so a suffering alcoholic becomes a recovering alcoholic, then he becomes a sponsor, and he keeps doing service because that is what he's supposed to do. So then people say, "Arey, ye to kya marketing ka kuch lagta hai yaar." Okay, no, but it's the same way, na? In medical science, when we get into a medical college, okay, we learn, right, from somebody. The houseman teaches you, the registrar teaches you, the lecturer teaches you, okay, and then you grow, then you get your qualifications, and then what happens? You start teaching somebody else. Pass it on. That is the way human beings have made progress. So whatever experiences I have, when I share it with somebody, it makes me better. It makes me feel good, and at the same time, I understand things which I am trying to understand better. So, when you teach somebody, you become better and you become happier. Now, it is absolutely essential for an alcoholic to be happy, for all of us to be happy. Why is it so essential for an alcoholic? The reason is that with all these addictive substances, every time the person consumes the drug, there is a huge throw of satisfactory chemicals in the brain. So there is something called a reward cascade in the brain. So what are the chemicals? There is serotonin, there is endorphin, there is GABA, there is DOPA, and it is like a firecracker. So whenever you take an addictive substance, these chemicals have a great time in the brain. Okay? And it happens, the same thing happens even in a non-alcoholic also. The only thing is, once the reward has happened, what transpires after the reward has happened, the post-reward phenomenon is something that is different. And the post-reward phenomenon is changes because of the genetic constitution, the kind of substances, the adverse childhood experiences, and variety of things. Now, what we know, Campbell was one of the neuroscientists. In 2009, what he did was, he tried to understand how adverse events affect the resilience of the brain. Okay, and he was able to give absolutely a stepwise affection of the human brain and its stress-bearing capacity. So we know that whenever there is stress, there is endogenous steroid secretion. So cortisol levels go up. And whenever the cortisol levels go up, they fire like crazy and they come down very slowly. So we know that all stress disorders happen because of the higher levels of stress, steroids. Which system it will affect, we don't know. Whichever is genetically the weakest. So somebody would have a heart attack, somebody would have a colonic cancer. So what it means is that whenever the stress levels are high, the body starts giving up at the weakest link. Now, whenever these steroid levels go up, at that time, the steroid metabolism starts changing. So kinates and quinolinates are the metabolites of steroids. When kinates are secreted, there is neuroregeneration, so good stress, eustress. And when quinolinates are secreted, then there is distress or bad stress. Now what we know is all these addictive substances, whenever they are consumed very frequently, the reason why they cause problems is because they are harmful. And how are they harmful? Because either the metabolites are bad, body to these drugs is too severe for the body to manage, so the body is overstressed, overworked to cope with these chemicals, or the body demands a lot whenever there is a release of these chemicals in the brain. So whenever that happens, we can actually trace that the body tissue function starts getting affected. So in the frontal cortex, we can now assess the volume of the frontal neurons. We can assess how the water goes from one side to the other side. We call it anisotropy. So you can actually make out the differences after the brain tissue has been affected. So much so that you can actually predict which person is going to recover and which person will not, depending upon the loss of frontal lobe volume in the brain. So what it means is that the psychological diagnosis now is getting into the neuropathological diagnosis. So we are looking at all these chemicals which apparently were getting into the body, creating a mood state and going out of the body. Now we know that they are not coming and going out. It is not a restaurant. It is creating an imprint. It is creating an imprint in the brain. And genetic structure would decide how severe that imprint would be. So there would be a spectrum. It would be 40 shades of grey. So if the genetics is weak, then you would be on one side of the pendulum, and if the genetics is good, then you would be on the other side, and you would not have a problem. Now, obviously, the person who has the understanding that there is a problem in his life does not know about these genetics, right? He never thought when he had his first drink that in his life he wants to be an alcoholic. Just like a diabetic doesn't think when he has sugar for the first time, एक दिन मेरे को diabetic बनने का है. Nobody thinks like that. But because he had the genetic vulnerability, he turned out to be diabetic. So he is not a mad person, he is not a bad person, but he is a sick person. He is ill. And that is the reason why he has swayed away from the designs and dreams that he had in his life before the drug came into his life. Now, who made him dream to be a doctor or an engineer or a chartered accountant? Who? That was his wish, right? Okay, somebody told him inside that you should become. Maybe it's the society, or maybe somebody that he started realizing. And we say, it's the God's wish. Why did I become a doctor? Did my parents tell me to become a doctor? No. But sometimes we don't know why we'll end up taking a decision, and then we say, okay, that's destiny. People who don't believe in God, they would say it's destiny. People who believe in God, they would say it's God's wish. But certainly some decisions were taken, okay, but this person, for him also those decisions were taken, but he swayed away, and then the only primary purpose of his living was procuring the next drink. So obviously, you have to keep reminding in his recovery, you will have to keep him reminding, okay, what was the primary purpose of your life? Before alcohol came to your life, what were your dreams? Listen, I wanted to be an engineer. Did you ever think of falling in the gutter after drinking alcohol? No, that was not my aim. When you start showing the discrepancy in his acts, okay, you call it motivational enhancement technique. And that is precisely what happens when a person listens to a sharing. In Marathi, there is a proverb which says that स्वतःच्या डोळ्यातलं मुसळ पण दिसत नाही, दुसऱ्याच्या डोळ्यातलं कुसळ दिसतं. Even a small thing that goes wrong in somebody else's behavior, you pick it up. But in your own behavior, okay, you don't pick it up and pick up anything wrong. So it happens with everybody. But with alcoholics or with drug addicts, everything gets exaggerated. Not just because the perception towards alcoholism is wrong. Everything gets exaggerated for a reason. And that reason is that in our brain, we have behind the central sulcus, there is an area called precuneum. And in that precuneum, something very funny happens. Those who are from the medical fraternity, they would know there is a condition called hemi-neglect. And people don't know, "Arey, ye kya ho gaya?" Then when he is walking through the door, he would bang his shoulder, get a fracture on his left shoulder, because he did not realize where was the frame and where was his shoulder. And once he has a bang, has a painful shoulder, again he will repeat the same thing. Now, to make you aware of that, we have this area. Suppose we walk out of a film which is a ghastly film, something like Omen or whatever, and we are walking on a road which is totally dark, and there suddenly a cat jumps and you get scared. That wouldn't happen when you are walking out of a Ghulam Ali concert. That wouldn't happen. Okay. Now, what part of the brain told you, you are getting scared unnecessarily? It's because of the film, it was just a cat. So there was course correction that happened. If that course correction did not happen, then the first thought would have persisted and you would have actually started seeing ghosts all around. In schizophrenia, the same thing happens. When the person has no insight, the person is not able to judge the environment and then processes information in the way that the brain is primed. So when you are primed to do something, you don't understand what kind of a mistake you are making. Now if that can happen in a cardiovascular accident, it could happen because of chemical intervention. Surprisingly, in rat models, we are able to create all symptoms of addiction. There are certain experiments that are done. So Weiwel was one of the scientists who worked extensively on animal models. And what did Weiwel do? What he did was, there were rats and there were levers. So whenever the rats would press a lever, one group of rats would get sugar water and the second would get a cocaine, amphetamine feeling. So obviously the rats would go and press the amphetamine lever. And then after 10 times, they stopped giving the amphetamine microdose. And then what happened was very interesting. The rats became aggressive because now they were not getting their amphetamine. So they were not only pressing the lever with their paws, but they started biting at the lever. Was this sign of desperation? Yes. And that's what my friends also do. When they need alcohol and they don't get alcohol, they become desperate. They don't say, "Arey band kiya lagta hai na." No. They will try to get it even on a dry day, even on 2nd of October, even if they have to pay a premium. They will do it. The other experiment that he conducted was that the same rats, were put in a cage, and on the cage had two sides. On the one side, he put a burner below. The levers were on this side. So when they were trained and they were told, this lever gives me amphetamine dose. So the rat started going towards that lever. Then he started the burner. So the black part of the cage started becoming hot. And when it started getting hot, most of the rats jumped. They started jumping on the other side. They didn't want to get burned. But some rats continued to go there. In spite of the temperature increasing, they were willing to take risks. They were willing to take pain. They were willing to burn themselves, but they kept on going. Then what he did was, they picked up these rats, in whom this desperation was there, the high risk seeking was there, and then they mated them with females with similar changes. And they realized that their offsprings were much easily jumping onto the lever with amphetamines. So that means you were able to create genes. Surprising, isn't it? So you were able to create addiction in animal models. So what it means is that if you can create more addiction in animal models, will it be possible to treat? What is the difference between the rats which were created, they were given addiction as a disease in the laboratory experiment. So they tried to trace what happened in the dopamine levels in the brain. And we knew that there is dopamine 1 receptor and dopamine 2 receptor. All of us are aware of the dopamine 1 receptor. So dopamine 1 receptor is the one which you got when you got good marks in your 10th standard. Dopamine 1, soon. And because you got good marks, your family started saying, "Isko abhi doctor banane ka." Right? So then they said, "Abhi barabar se padhai karne ka, ekdam, kuch cricket, kuch nahi." The poor guy, he wanted to play cricket. But he was forced. Because he was told, remember the dopamine 1 flurry that you got when you were in 10. So you were willing to do the studies painstakingly in order to anticipate a D1 high. Okay? And you started feeling good about yourself. Cricket match देखा नहीं यार, Champions Trophy भी देखा नहीं, India Pakistan भी देखा नहीं, कुछ नहीं, because you were motivated to take pain in anticipation of D1. So all of us have done it. We have done it so many times. What happens in addiction is precisely the same thing. But what happens is D1 and D2, both of them go up when you consume. And then what happens is the D2 levels get hooked on to anticipating the next D1 high. So all D2 start saying that how am I going to procure D1? So it starts selecting people, places, situations and things which will make D1 easily available. And that is the reason why we say birds of the same feather flock together. ये एडिक्ट लोग किधर भी जाएंगे ना उनको एडिक्ट ही दिखाई देते हैं. And then we realized that people with addiction disorders, they choose genetically matching D1 related partners. So friendships are also genetically designed. So we say that हाँ वो अपने किस्म का लगता है, इसके साथ दोस्ती हो जाएगा. अपने किस्म का लगता है यानी क्या? That is the behavioral phenotype of that person matches you or your phenotype. And because of that you feel comfortable. Your likes are the same, your dislikes are the same. That's the reason why you match with each other. And what decides, Cloninger says that all the likes and dislikes are decided by your genes. And that is where the personality starts playing a role. And so, okay, this is fine. So you meet a person and talk to him. Why do they say that come to the meeting? You said meeting is the tool in Alcoholics Anonymous. Why do you have to come in the meeting? So they have a state prayer. I don't recollect it exactly. Maybe Kushan will be able to tell us. The prayer says that I wanted to look for my God, but I couldn't find thee. I wanted a friend, I couldn't find one. I came to the meeting and I found everything. I wanted a soulmate, I wanted a God, I wanted a friend. Okay, and I came to a meeting in the fellowship, I got everything. So then it comes to mind, what is fellowshipping? Why is it not friendshipping? Fellowshipping is with a purpose. So our Webster book dictionary says that fellowshipping is a group of people assembled with a common purpose. Okay? They just don't come and do gossiping. It's not for gossip. That is, if you are gossiping in the group, then it is friendshipping. If there is a purpose to the group, okay, and so we came to a close connect in psychology, we call it enriched environments. So what are enriched environments? Environments where there is a structured, a purpose, structured way to achieve that purpose, and members who are willing to follow that structured path towards that goal. So that is the reason, if such an environment is there, then you call it enriched environment. Now what does the research in the enriched environments says that it not only changes the medium spiny neurons in the brain, but it changes the way the receptors respond to the neurotransmitters. It changes the way the neurotransmitters are produced in our brain. But it doesn't happen in a jiffy. What happens is the oxytocin and vasopressin chemicals in the brain, which are associated with love and bonding. I'm sure everybody knows that oxytocin is associated with love. But actually it's a misconception. Oxytocin is not associated only with love. It is associated, even male-male bonding is associated with oxytocin. And human species apparently are the only species where non-reproductive unions of opposite sex are possible. So humans are the only animals And what happens is oxytocin and vasopressin play a significant role in this human bonding. So oxytocin sympathizes, vasopressin becomes protective. So next time when you, the younger one, whenever you feel jealousy about your beau, then you know that it's vasopressin, don't blame it on him. It's because of your vasopressin that you become protective of the object that you love and you don't want to share it with anybody. And that we call as human emotion of jealousy. And why is it important? Because it has a survival value. Because spiritually, whatever we own, we are going to lose. So oxytocin and vasopressin are protective ways. When we lose, the oxytocin, vasopressin levels, zoom, they go down. And when they go down, they have to come up. So it creates an environment for further bonding. So it's a survival. So if one loved object is gone, you are becoming ready for the second one. So that is the reason why we call it rebound phenomenon in relationship. Maybe psychologists have heard about it. Rebound phenomenon. Okay, it's not a good thing to happen. If it happens slowly, the oxytocin vasopressin levels come up very slowly. Now the same chemicals are associated with the addictive substances. So I heard Pushan in the morning, he was talking about how there is an intimate relationship between the person and his addictive substance. It's an intimate relationship. The person wants to spend all the time with that object. If anybody criticizes it, becomes very possessive. If somebody else has better, he feels jealous. So all the feelings of love and bonding are associated. Anybody who comes in between becomes your enemy. That is the reason why expressed emotions go skyrocketing. And when you decide that you want to break the relationship, the vasopressin, oxytocin levels, you are cutting them off. So they have to have an object. So in addiction, the object was the drug of choice. In recovery, there has to be an object of choice. And that object of choice cannot be anything else but an unconditional support of an enriched environment. So that's the reason why they say that you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. You alone can do it, but you can't do it alone because you would require support. And why do you require support? And if you require support, whose support? Can you be in your normal friends? The reason is the dopaminergic A1 receptor, okay, the friendship gene is homophilic. Homophilic is that it tries to reach out to people who have the same gene. And that is the reason why in recovery, the friendships happen very fast. In normal circumstances, okay, friendships in normal people doesn't happen very fast. Even if you go to Rotary or Lions Club, okay, the friendships take a long time to happen. But you come for AA meetings or NA meetings, okay, you will realize that the friendships happen very fast. And it surprises you. And then you start feeling, because they are sharing the most intimate things, there are no barriers, and that's the reason. No, the real reason is the dopaminergic receptor, the dopaminergic gene, A1 gene, okay, is self-selecting. So if there are 10 people who have the higher expression of dopaminergic gene, they will connect better. Those who have lower expression, they will take some time, but they will keep bonding. They will keep bonding. So I have seen people in Alcoholics Anonymous who don't understand the 12 steps. They don't want to go for 12 steps. They don't understand God. But there is something about vasopressin and oxytocin that is helping them. So they are using Alcoholics Anonymous not for the 12-step program, but the fellowshipping experience. The allele is choosing itself for the happiness of the 3 hedonic hotspots. And that is the reason why everybody doesn't have to use all the 4 tools. But if you use the 4 tools, then that's the best thing to happen. But you cannot, they don't force anything upon anybody. It's absolutely a liberal movement. So what they say is that this is what helped me to try it out. What is important is that the mental health professionals have to understand that first, observe what is happening. If you are willing to observe, keep an open mind, read about the science behind it. The 3 things that probably you would want to read, okay, is the 3 hedonic hotspots, the adaptive evolutionary bonding, and genospirituality. And if that happens, you would understand cognitive behavioral therapy. If that happens, you will understand the first 3 steps because of genospirituality. The next 4th to 9th step, okay, which are the action steps or the corrective steps, which are very close to what cognitive behavioral therapy does. So you make a list of whatever wrongs that you have done, and then to share it with somebody. Once you share it, write it down properly, make an exhaustive list, and ask that, okay, you have to correct it. Okay, and when you are correcting it, go and meet people whom you have wronged, and as long as it's not going to harm their interest, keep talking about it, own it up. You need social contact. Nah? We are social animals, so we can't be living in our own world. We require a hierarchy of people, we require family relationships. And how can we create new families? We have to live with whatever families that we have. And in addiction, we wrong them. So obviously, whom would we go and meet and correct ourselves with? Our friends and family members, the closest ones are going to get affected more. So there you learn about how to cope with fear, anger, resentment. Because all this fear, anger, resentment are the reasons which are going to boil the glutamatergic system and make you vulnerable for a relapse. And make you D1 driven choices. So that is the reason why you have to work on this program and try to get your emotional aspect in control. So they always say that relapse is a process, it's not an event, it's a process. So there are some precursors, there is an emotional incidence, and then there is a thinking process. So in the precursors, suddenly the desire to go away from alcohol stops. So desire goes away. I want to drink. Nobody can help. You drink. The other thing is suddenly the acceptance to disease is there, but the treatment isn't there. So I'm willing to accept that I have diabetes, but I'm not willing to give up on alcohol, on sugar. How will the diabetes get well? So desire, the acceptance to treatment is not there. The third is attitude becomes questionable. You start questioning each and everything. Kyun karu ye? Why do I do it? Now that I am sober, why do I need Alcoholics Anonymous? Sometimes even the family members are, now you're sober, why do you want to go every day for the meeting? It is extremely important. Because the natural tendency of the alcoholic has shifted towards consumption. So if you go away from the support system, the natural tendency would recur and the natural tendency would take you back to your consumption. And that is the reason why if you do all the 4 tools, the 4th tool, the 12-step call, you trying to convince others by sharing yourself, share your story, okay, that is the biggest reinforcer because the denial that you see makes you aware of what state you were in. So you see the mistakes in the other person, okay, and then you understand, okay, you are doing the same thing. And that is where the 4th, the last phase, okay, where you have to keep repeatedly asking yourself, are you doing things in the right way? Have you, not drunk, haven't had a drink, but have your character defects come up again? The lack of truthfulness, lack of belief, attitudes, have they come back to you? Has your daily schedule changed? Have you been less disciplined? Have your emotions gone? You have to keep checking. So these are maintenance steps. So like last 10th, 11th and 12th, they have these steps are maintenance steps. So overall, from first step to the 12th step is a program which makes you humble, gets ready for change, identifies the change that you want to bring about in your life, gives you a way of working on it, gives you the strength by giving unconditional positive regard from the meetings, and then gives you the tools which can find out whenever you waver, immediately it can find out that okay, this is where you are going wrong. So it's not a treatment for alcoholism, it's a change in the lifestyle, and that's the reason if you follow the 12-step program and practice it in all aspects of your life, then there is a personality change which is perceptible. Will it be profound or not? Depends on the quality of change that you want to bring about. So it is extremely important. Sometimes when people attend the AA groups, they find it very difficult to accept. I saw that. Anywhere there are 2 people coming in, 3 people coming in, there are going to be conflicts. And conflicts happen in political parties. We are aware, you are not aware, you are in Goa, we are in from Maharashtra, so you know what happens in Maharashtra. So conflicts happen everywhere. Everywhere conflicts happen. But it is necessary to have conflicts. Because the conflicts are to refine the judgment. So if I say something and everybody agrees, then if I make a mistake, then what happens? Everybody makes a mistake. So they call it group conscience. But group conscience will prevail only when there is freedom to express. If you feel threatened by me and you will not express, then it can't be group conscience. So that is the reason why sometimes as outsiders, those who are not alcoholics, we attend a meeting, sometimes we feel, "Arey, ye kya hai?" But what I would request you is that you have to understand that everything that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous, surprisingly, happens with a purpose. And it's amazing that how people have thought about it. The whole philosophy of the 12 steps, the way it is conducted. So people know about the 12 steps, but there are something like 12 traditions and 12 concepts. Everything finally holds everything together. And they say recovery, service and honesty. Right? Unity. Recovery, service and unity, they are the 3 pillars on which everything goes around. So for recovery, you have the 12 steps. Unity, you have to maintain. हांडा काय पण करा, गळे पकडा पण एकत्र राहा. And you cannot wish away yourself from service. Because having got the message, you can't go away. And that is the reason why this fellowship has gone to 183 countries. No corporate goes. Maybe Windows goes, but that is the corrupted one. And they have an advertisement, they went through illegal ways, they allowed copying without any action. These people, all suffering alcoholics, together work for the fellowship. And that is how the international convention has come to Goa. So it is people from Goa who are alcoholics, are recovering, and they decided that okay, they got the message because somebody became aware of something called the fellowship, and they were told, because the alcoholic when he's suffering, okay, can't make out anything, so how will he find out a solution for his problem? His family members are confused. And that is where people like us need to show them the way ahead. And that is where Alcoholics Anonymous becomes a community resource. And Cochrane review says that it is better than the other treatment as usual. And that is the fantastic work that we are doing. And the last thing about this theme is about women and youth. So last word about women and youth. Women find it extremely difficult. It is getting easier for women to consume alcohol because we have been able to sell a lifestyle. We have been able to sell a definition of modernity. And that's the reason women find it extremely easy to access alcohol. Women who are modern and liberal, they want the equal rights. I don't know why they want in vices also. Okay, they can take the virtues, don't mind, but why should we have the vices? Okay. All these addictive substances, unfortunately, are more harmful to women. Because of their body structure, the availability of addictive substances in women's brain is higher than for the same dose in men. And because of the estrous cycle, the menstrual cycle, what happens is during the high estrogen phase, the brain responds more efficiently to these addictive substances. So during the adolescent age, if there is exposure, there is something called telescoping. The progress of the disease is faster. Unfortunately, the same kind of mistake when the man does is not a social outcast. He's supposed to be doing because he's a man. But for a woman to behave in that particular fashion is something which is horrible. The society wants to hide it, the family wants to hide it, the woman tries to hide it, and so reaches the treatment very late in her life. So women find it extremely difficult to come into the recovery. The telescoping makes them vulnerable, more vulnerable to emotional relapses. And that is the reason why when a woman alcoholic comes into a meeting, many a times it becomes extremely difficult for her to adjust to the meetings or other people to accommodate her in the meetings. Now this is a phenomenon that is seen worldwide. And that is the reason women in alcoholism, they have separate meetings also. Identification is a taboo, so many of these meetings are online also. So I would recommend that those people who have contacts with people who are of both genders should access these meetings if it's a feminine gender. Youth, the age of first exposure for drugs in India has dropped down significantly. In 1990s, it was around 16 to 18. Now it has dropped down to 12 to 14. And whenever the first exposure happens before the age of 15 years, then the likelihood of social damage increases 5 times in that person. So you can imagine that there is going to be a huge population of kids who would have some kind of a social problem in their lives in the coming years. And that is the reason why the society needs to prepare itself for the challenges that this problem will throw up. The industry which is benefiting with these addictive substances, they have a synchronized effort. They are so efficient that during COVID times also, they were giving hand delivery, home delivery, when Swiggy and Zomato were not functioning. Because everything is illegal, so they don't require any legal okays. So it is so efficiently working machinery that unless the voice which goes against these drugs also starts becoming synchronized, we won't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that is the reason community coalitions is extremely important. And the 12-step program has been working on it. Let's be friendly with our friends. They have a whole brochure on that. So whatever that we now understand in communities, in addiction prevention, seems to be mentioned in the literature that Alcoholics Anonymous has. So alcoholicsanonymous.org is the website. The Indian website is there. You have been given some brochures. There will be a lot of information there. Please open it, read it. If you have, there are some copies of Big Book here. Those people who are interested, I would probably say that I learned more of addiction psychiatry in that book than the Galanter, which is a textbook of addiction psychiatry. So I learned that more, in that book more. So please, whoever wants to know about addiction psychiatry, maybe reading this book, seeing patients and reading Galanter, all these three things would help. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm sure I'm aware of the gastronomic desires that you would have. So thank you very much for your patience.